Okay, let's dive in. We're going deep today into the philosophy of the late Roman Republic, and we're focusing on, well, a giant figure, Marcus Tullius Cicero. You know, the famous Roman orator, the statesman, philosopher.
Absolutely, a towering figure, as you say. Hard to overstate his importance in Roman history.
But here's the twist, and this is where it gets really fascinating for our purposes. A lot of the core Stoic ideas we talk about, the really rigorous stuff, the definitions, the ethical arguments, they actually reached us mainly through Cicero and the Picker. He wasn't, strictly speaking, a Stoic himself. He publicly identified differently.
That's the crux of it, isn't it? It's a bit of a puzzle.
So our mission today, using the sources we've got, is to really unpack Cicero's philosophical identity. It's complicated. He was formally linked to a school of skepticism.
Academic skepticism, yeah. That was his official alignment, if you like.
Right. Yet somehow his writings became this, essential library, preserving some of the most crucial and, honestly, some of the most challenging Stoic doctrines, especially the ethics.
It's a paradox. How does the doubter become the main conduit for such a dogmatic philosophy?
Exactly. We need to figure out the mechanism. How did this skeptic become maybe the most important historian, in a way, for Stoicism?
Well, as you mentioned, he was formally associated with the academic arrangement. This meant he leaned heavily towards academic skepticism. The core idea there is critical examination of all doctrines, rather than committing fully to just one.
So questioning everything, basically. Weighing the argument.
Pretty much. Holding judgment in suspension where certainty wasn't possible. And yet you open Cicero and it's just this treasure trove of Stoic thought, especially from the earlier periods, the Middle and Early Stoa.
And it wasn't just passive reporting, you're saying?
No, not at all. His method, the way he presented these ideas, especially in his dialogues, actively shaped what survived and, crucially, how the Roman world, his audience, came to understand Stoicism. He framed it.
Okay, so let's start there. Why was he so vital? What happened that made Cicero, the non-Stoic, so indispensable for preserving Stoicism?
It really comes down to a historical catastrophe, frankly. We often talk about the big names, Zeno, the founder, Cleanthes, and especially Chrysippus.
Chrysippus, right. The one who supposedly wrote hundreds of books. The great systematizer.
That's the one. He laid out the whole system, physics, logic, ethics in meticulous detail. The problem is, the tragedy is, none of their original major works survived antiquity. Not a single complete book.
Wow. None. How is that even possible for such an influential school?
It's staggering. Think about it. Hundreds of works by Chrysippus alone. Gone. They never made that crucial transition from the ancient format, the papyrus scrolls, which were perishable, into the codices, the bound books that were copied and preserved through the Middle Ages. Parchment lasted. Papyrus, not so much unless conditions were perfect, like in Egypt.
So everything foundational just vanished.
The comprehensive treatises, yes. We have fragments, quotations in later authors like Diogenes Laertius or Plutarch, but the originals, lost. And that's where Cicero steps in.
He becomes the link.
He becomes the vital, irreplaceable link. Especially for the nitty-gritty details, the technical definitions in ethics, the logical structures of arguments. He's not just summarizing. Often, he seems to be quoting or closely paraphrasing texts that are otherwise completely lost to us.
And he actually tells us who he's using.
That's the genius of it. Often, yes. He names his sources, which is incredibly valuable for scholars today. It gives us a roadmap.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Take his famous work on Duties de Officiis. He wrote it incredibly fast, right at the end of his life, in a period of turmoil.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's our primary source for understanding the ethics of the Middle Stoa, the phase after the founders. And Cicero explicitly says he's basing large parts of it on the work of Panicius of Rhodes.
Panicius. He adapted Stoicism more for Roman life, right?
Exactly. So De Officiis gives us this immediate, concrete window into how Stoicism was evolving, moving from the super theoretical, sometimes quite abstract Greek system into something more practical, more focused on Roman concerns like duty, public life, social roles.
Okay, but back to the paradox. If he's an academic skeptic, committed to looking at all sides, Stoics, Epicureans, Aristotle's followers, the Peripatetics, why does he seem to give the Stoics, especially their ethics, such detailed treatment? Wouldn't skepticism mean giving everyone equal, maybe equally critical space?
That's the really interesting tension, isn't it? His skeptical method actually helps explain it. In works like the Tusculan Disputations, which are structured as dialogues exploring difficult questions.
Like what?
Oh, the nature of happiness, how to endure pain, dealing with grief, the nature of emotions, what duty requires, really fundamental human question,
The big ones.
the big ones. And his method required him to present the strongest possible arguments for each side of the debate. And when it came to these ethical questions, the Stoics often had the most systematic, the most logically coherent, even if sometimes extreme, answers.
So to have a good debate, he needed the best arguments, and the Stoics often provided them.
Precisely. He was acting, in a sense, like a really good philosophical journalist or historian. He wanted to lay out the whole landscape of Hellenistic thought for his Roman readers. To do that properly, he had to give the Stoic positions a full, fair hearing, presenting their arguments in detail.
Even if he didn't personally buy into all of it.
Exactly. He needed their arguments, especially as a counterweight to views he strongly disagreed with, like those of the Epicureans, which he often criticized as being, well, soft or focused too much on pleasure.
He called them effeminate, didn't he?
He did use terms like that, yes. He found their focus on avoiding pain and seeking tranquility through simple pleasures insufficient, especially for a Roman statesman. So he needed a strong counter-argument, a philosophy that emphasized virtue, duty, resilience. And the Stoics provided that in spades.
So the contrast helps us see the Stoic view more clearly.
Definitely. The contrast clarifies. And we get the Stoic arguments presented by someone who admired their intellectual power and moral seriousness, even if he maintained his skeptical reservations about their certainty on, say, physics or theology.
It also helps to remember when he was writing some of this stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely critical context. Many of these philosophical works, including the Tusculan Disputations, were written during the absolute chaos of the late Republic's collapse. Civil wars, proscriptions.
Plus intense personal grief, like the death of his daughter, Tullia.
Yes, devastating personal loss, political exile, the constant threat of violence. He was living through incredibly turbulent times. It makes perfect sense that he'd immerse himself in philosophies that offered ways to cope, to find inner stability.
And Stoicism, above all, promises that kind of inner fortress, doesn't it?
It does. It promises an impregnable citadel of the mind, a happiness immune to external fortune. Even if Cicero, as a skeptic, couldn't fully sign up to all the metaphysical claims, the ethical framework, the focus on virtue and resilience must have held immense appeal. He wasn't just documenting abstract ideas. He was grappling with philosophies that might offer solace or even survival in a world falling apart.
Okay, so he's the crucial librarian, preserving this stuff against the odds. Let's dig into the substance he saved. Starting with the basics. What did the Stoics say was the goal of life?
The core Stoic mission, right from Zeno, was to live in conformity with nature, or more specifically, in conformity with human nature, which they saw as fundamentally rational. So living virtuously is living rationally. That's virtue with a capital V.
And this wasn't just about ethics in isolation, was it? Didn't they have a whole system?
Yes, a unified system. You had physics understanding the nature of the cosmos, which they saw as a rational, ordered whole, permeated by divine reason or logos. Then logic, the tools for clear thinking and correct reasoning. And then ethics, how to apply that understanding of nature and reason to live a good human life.
So you need to understand the world and how to think straight before you can figure out how to act right.
Exactly. Ethics flows from physics and logic. And central to their ethics is this radical idea we touched on. True happiness, eudaimonia, has to be completely untouchable by external circumstances.
It has to be weatherproof, basically. Immune to politics, illness, poverty, even torture.
That's the claim. If your happiness depends on anything outside your own mind, your own reasoned choice, then it's fragile. It's not true happiness. It's borrowed, conditional.
Which leads us to one of the really key Stoic concepts. Cicero preserved this idea about action and outcome. The archer analogy, right?
Yes, the archer analogy. It's a brilliant illustration that helps explain how virtue alone can be sufficient for happiness, regardless of what happens externally. It clarifies the distinction between the action and the result. Cicero's account of this is crucial.
Okay, walk us through it. How does the archer help explain Stoic virtue?
Cicero uses this example. Imagine an archer. What is their ultimate aim? According to the Stoics, as Cicero relays it, the archer's true goal, the thing that defines their success as an archer, is to do all in one's power to shoot straight.
Okay, so the effort, the skill.
Yes. The diligent aiming, the careful consideration of wind and distance, the smooth release, the application of skill and focus. That whole internal process, the virtuous activity itself, is the real goal.
And that activity is happiness.
For the Stoic, yes. Perfecting that internal activity, acting with skill and correct intention according to reason, that is the state of flourishing. It's a state of being where your character, your rational agency, is functioning perfectly.
So what about hitting the target? Does that not matter at all?
Wow, this is the crucial distinction Cicero preserves. Hitting the target, the external outcome, is not the goal itself, in the sense of being essential for happiness. It's what the Stoics called a preferred indifferent.
Preferred indifferent. That sounds like a contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? But what they mean is, hitting the target is naturally preferable. All things being equal, you'd rather succeed externally. You select actions, like aiming carefully, precisely because they are the rational way to try and achieve such outcomes.
So you aim to hit it.
You aim to hit it, you do everything skillfully to hit it, but your happiness, your virtue, isn't dependent on whether you actually hit it. Hitting the target is to be selected, but not sought as a necessary component of your well-being.
So if the archer does everything perfectly, perfect stance, perfect draw, perfect release, but like a sudden gust of wind blows the arrow off course or an eagle snatches it midair,
Ridiculous example, but yes.
the archer has still succeeded.
In the Stoic sense, yes. They have achieved the only thing that truly matters philosophically, the perfection of their own internal rational activity. Their virtue is intact. The outcome was outside their complete control, subject to fate or circumstance.
That really shifts the focus inward, doesn't it? It's all about your intention and effort.
Entirely. It explains the Stoic emphasis on motives, on the quality of your judgment and volition over external results. We strive to act appropriately. Kathekanta, the Greek term Cicero, helps translate as officia, duties. But we must accept that we don't ultimately control the outcomes. That acceptance is key to tranquility.
This idea that only our inner state matters pushes towards that really radical Stoic claim. Virtue is the only true good, and vice the only true evil.
It does. It's the logical conclusion. If happiness must be totally secure, and only our virtue, our rational functioning, is fully under our control, then only virtue can be the true good. Everything else, health, wealth, reputation, pain, sickness, death, must be.
Indifferent, not truly good or evil.
Precisely. And Cicero is invaluable here because he preserves the Stoics grappling with the most extreme implications of this. He records their argument that happiness, founded on virtue, remains intact even under torture.
Okay, stop there. That's the point where I think most people today go, wait, what? How can someone being tortured still be considered happy?
It's perhaps the hardest Stoic doctrine to swallow. But Cicero documents their line of reasoning. He quotes or paraphrases the core belief. No evil exists except fault, moral error, vice, and no fault exists when that which could not be provided or prevented by man happens. Meaning, if something happens to you that is outside your control, like being captured and tortured, and you maintain your rational integrity, your virtue, your correct judgment throughout it, then you haven't lapsed into fault or vice. And since only fault is truly evil, you haven't actually suffered any true evil. The pain is real, obviously, but it doesn't damage your core self, your moral character, which is the only place true good or evil resides.
So the pain is just an external event. An indifferent, maybe a dispreferred one, but not an evil.
That is exactly the hardcore Stoic position Cicero recorded for us. The physical pain happens to the body, which is external to the ruling faculty, the hegemonikon. Your wealth, your family, your health, even your life. They are ultimately external advantages or disadvantages. They are indifference. They do not, according to this doctrine, touch your eudaimonia, your true flourishing, which depends only on the quality of your judgment and your will.
It offers absolute freedom in a way, doesn't it? If you can truly internalize that, your happiness becomes unassailable.
That's the promise. Your well-being is guaranteed, provided you rigorously guard your judgment and assent only to what is true and act only virtuously. Cicero, laying this out, even with his own skeptical distance, is a massive contribution to our understanding of just how radical Stoicism was.
Okay, so if virtue and right judgment are the only good, then the main enemy must be the things that corrupt our judgment, right? The emotions.
Exactly. The passions or disturbing emotions. And again, Cicero is crucial because he preserves the Stoics' very specific technical definition of these emotions. We tend to think of emotions as just feelings that happen to us.
Yeah, like anger bubbling up or fear hitting you.
Right. But for the Stoics, as Cicero documents, the pather weren't just raw feelings. They were fundamentally cognitive events, generated by mistaken judgments or false assents.
So my anger isn't just a feeling, it starts with me wrongly judging something.
Precisely. They saw these passions as essentially diseases of the soul, all stemming from intellectual error. You have to assent to a false belief about the value of something, usually something external, for the destructive emotion to take hold.
And Cicero gives us the specifics.
He does. He preserves formulations for the four cardinal passions. Desire, reaching for a perceived future good. Fear, avoiding a perceived future evil. Delight or irrational pleasure, assenting to a perceived present good. And distress or pain, assenting to a perceived present evil.
Let's take fear as an example. How did they define that through judgment?
Cicero records the definition. Fear is caused by the belief that some serious evil is impending. Now, the key Stoic move is the definition of serious evil.
Which can only be vice or moral corruption.
Exactly. So the initial trigger might be seeing an enemy army approaching. That's an impression and a current supposition. The emotion of fear only fully ignites when that impression interacts with your dispositional belief, your underlying conviction that, say, being captured or killed is a true evil, something that can fundamentally harm your well-being.
But if you're a committed Stoic?
If you're a committed Stoic, you hold the dispositional belief that only vice is truly evil. Death, capture, pain, these are indifferents. Therefore, the impression enemy army approaching cannot logically connect with the belief a true evil is impending. The judgment required for the passion of fear cannot be formed.
So you might feel maybe an initial physical shock, adrenaline.
Perhaps what they call propithei, or first movements, involuntary physical reactions. But not the full-blown pathos, the soul-disturbing emotion based on false judgment. Cicero's documentation makes this cognitive structure really clear. The passion isn't the racing heart itself. It's the erroneous judgment that leads to the racing heart and the mental disturbance.
This intellectual definition of emotion makes sense, then, of their practical exercises. If emotion starts with judgment, you need exercises to train your judgment.
Absolutely. And guess who documents one of the most famous Stoic practices for doing just that?
Cicero.
Cicero. He records the practice often called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils.
Ah, yes. Thinking about bad things happening in advance.
Right. And Cicero doesn't just describe it theoretically. He records it almost like a personal reflection, citing an old sage, where he talks about deliberately contemplating potential future disasters.
To steel himself against them.
Exactly, to ensure his mind isn't ambushed by shock and grief if they actually happen. He gives us that incredible quote, aut mortem axoram, aut exili maestam fugam, aut semper aliquam molem meditabar mali.
Can you translate that for us?
Roughly, either bitter death or sad flight into exile, or always I would meditate on some burden of evil, and the purpose. Ut siqua invecta diritas casu foret, neme imperatum cura lacerare trepens.
Meaning?
So that if any dreadful catastrophe should happen by chance, worry might not suddenly tear me apart unprepared.
Wow. That really speaks to his time, doesn't it? He wasn't meditating on, missing a promotion. He was thinking about exile, death.
Real and present dangers for a prominent Roman politician in that era. Assassination, exile, civil war, loss of property, loss of loved ones. These were not abstract possibilities for Cicero or his contemporaries.
So by thinking about them beforehand?
He's applying the ethical framework. He's rehearsing the judgment that these are external events, indifference, not true evils, capable of destroying his inner well-being. The practice aims to strip future misfortunes of their power to shock and overwhelm. As he says, if catastrophe hits, it will not find me unprepared.
It dilutes the impact in advance.
It extenuates and dilutes the troubles, yes. The shock factor, which hugely amplifies grief and fear, is lessened because the mind has already processed the possibility and categorized it correctly. External, indifferent, survivable for my core self. Cicero gives us both the Stoic theory of emotion and a practical prescription, documented from his own engagement with it.
It's so valuable to see that connection. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. How do these specific Stoic arguments that Cicero saved, like virtue being tied to rationality, connect back to the bigger picture? To Socrates, for instance.
The Socratic connection is fundamental. The Stoics saw themselves very much as heirs to Socrates, especially his ethical focus. The core Socratic idea, sometimes called ethical intellectualism, is that people always act in ways they believe will be good for them. Nobody intentionally chooses what they genuinely think is bad for their overall well-being.
So wrongdoing comes from ignorance, mistakenly thinking something bad is actually good.
Exactly. You mistake pleasure or wealth or power for the true good, which Socrates argued was the health of the soul, or virtue. Therefore, virtuous action is rational action, acting based on correct knowledge of what is truly good.
And the Stoics took this and ran with it.
They systematized it and arguably radicalized it. If, as they argued, all external things are indifferent, then the only thing that can possibly be truly good for you is the state of your own reason, your own virtuous choice. prohairesis, as Epictetus would later emphasize.
So caring for your soul, your judgment, is the only rational thing to do.
It's the logical consequence. And this explains why later Stoics like Epictetus, whose ideas we also know partly through Arrian's transcriptions, constantly hammered home the idea of focusing only on what is up to us, our judgments, assents, and intentions. Cicero's works help us see the earlier foundational arguments for this Socratic Stoic position.
And Cicero highlights this severity, this focus on internal virtue, by contrasting it with their main rivals, right? Particularly the Epicureans.
Yes, the Tusculan disputations are full of this contrast. He really sets up the Stoic view against the Epicurean view of happiness, and he definitely doesn't hide his preference, even as a skeptic.
He wasn't a fan of the Epicureans, calling their philosophy effeminate and voluptuary. What was the core difference in how they saw the good life?
The difference is night and day, really. For the Stoics, as we've seen, happiness, eudaimonia, is achieved only through virtue, the perfection of reason, living in accord with nature, embracing duty, regardless of external circumstances like pain.
Okay, and the Epicureans?
The Epicureans define the highest good as pleasure. But, and this is crucial, they mostly define pleasure negatively, as the absence of pain, aponia, absence of bodily pain, and ataraxia, absence of mental disturbance or tranquility.
So not chasing wild pleasures, but achieving a stable state of calm.
Exactly. Their goal was a simple, quiet life, minimizing needs and disturbances, removing hunger, thirst, cold, fear that was the path to pleasure, which they equated with happiness. Epicurus even argued quite radically that the pleasure of a single moment, if it involves complete absence of pain, is just as complete and perfect as a pleasure lasting infinitely long.
Wow. So Stoics find happiness through virtuous struggle and correct judgment, even amidst pain, while Epicureans find it by minimizing pain and seeking tranquility.
That's a good summary. The Stoic seeks a positive state of flourishing through rational action. The Epicurean seeks a negative state of freedom from disturbance.
Given these two options, why did the Stoic view, preserved so well by Cicero, seem to resonate more powerfully in Rome, especially among the elite? The Epicurean life sounds quite appealing, frankly, less stressful.
It might sound appealing, but it ran against the grain of core Roman values. Remember the mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors.
Duty, service, discipline, courage.
Precisely. Roman identity, especially for the upper classes, was deeply tied to public service, military command, upholding justice, civic responsibility, maintaining fides, good faith, reliability. The Epicurean ideal, which often recommended withdrawing from the messy, demanding world of politics to cultivate a private garden of tranquility.
That wouldn't fly with a Roman senator or general.
Not easily. It could be seen as shirking one's duty to the Republic. The Stoic philosophy, however, especially as filtered and adapted by figures like Panatius and then documented by Cicero, fit the Roman ethos much better.
How so?
The Greek Stoic concept of kathikonta, appropriate actions, got translated and really emphasized as officia duties. Cicero's De Officiis is the prime example. It provided a powerful philosophical framework for understanding and justifying the Roman commitment to public life, integrity, enduring hardship for the common good, and maintaining character even when facing political disaster or war.
It gave them a language for their existing values.
A philosophical language and justification, yes. Stoicism offered a philosophy of action, resilience, and duty in the world, not withdrawal from it. The idea that reason or providence gave humans the capacity for virtue and self-determination was easily interpreted as a divine mandate to uphold those qualities, particularly in public life.
So concepts like fidelity, justice, courage, self-control, these weren't just social expectations, they had a cosmic backing in Stoicism.
That's how it was often received. It reinforced the very character traits Rome prized. So Cicero, the ultimate Roman statesman trying desperately to save the Republic through his words and actions, naturally preserved and highlighted the philosophy that best supported that civic virtue. It became, in many ways, the default philosophical backdrop for the Roman elite for centuries, even if very few were probably 100% Orthodox Stoics.
So looking back at everything we've discussed, Cicero's role was just immense. Accidental, maybe, given his skepticism, but immense.
Absolutely miraculous in a way. He was this vital conduit, this bridge across time. Without him, our understanding of early and middle Stoicism, the precise definitions of virtue, that crucial archer analogy distinguishing agency from outcome, the cognitive theory of emotions would be vastly poorer. It's deeply ironic.
The professional philosophical doubter becomes the greatest literary champion, or at least preserver, of the core arguments of one of his main philosophical rivals.
It's an incredible legacy, and it speaks so directly to us now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Cicero was writing amidst political chaos, social upheaval, personal loss, a world that feels unsettlingly familiar sometimes.
Yeah, the turbulence definitely resonates.
And what did he meticulously record from the Stoics?
That core prescription, true evil lies only in our own moral fault, our own flawed judgment. External events, no matter how terrible they seem, war, plague, economic collapse, betrayal, are ultimately just natural incidents, things that happen to us, but not things that define our intrinsic worth or can destroy our capacity for happiness if we choose correctly. It puts the power and the responsibility squarely back on us, on our judgment.
Completely. That capacity for rational self-determination, for grounding your well-being only on your internal state, your integrity, your reasoned choices. That's the profound freedom Cicero helped preserve for us.
So, the final thought for our listeners.
It has to be about application, doesn't it? If Cicero, facing the disintegration of his world, the loss of his daughter, the threat of execution, took the time to document this Stoic idea that the only real harm comes from your own mistaken judgments. What about you listening now? What are you doing today to identify those false beliefs, those faulty judgments about externals that cause you anxiety, fear, or grief? What steps are you taking to shift your reliance away from things you can't control and onto the one thing no external power, no political turmoil, no economic downturn, no pandemic can ever take away from you? The integrity of your own reasoned choice.
That inner citadel.
That inner citadel. That's the ancient wisdom Cicero saved. It's not just history. It's a living challenge waiting for you to pick it up and use it.